Hi everyone, this video will outline how to use in-text citations and quotations according to the 7th edition of APA style. Citing your work properly will also ensure that you do not commit plagiarism, which of course is important. If you are looking for information on how to create a reference list at the end of your paper, I have a separate video for that, which is linked to in the video description below. The video description also contains timestamps that will jump you to various parts of the video. So if you are just looking for one thing in particular, use the timestamps to get there. I am demonstrating everything in this video using Microsoft Word on a Windows computer. If you are using a different word processing program or using Word for Mac, the citations will still look the same. In order to get the most use out of this video, though, I recommend pausing and rewinding as needed. As a couple of other quick notes, I am using lorem ipsum text or placeholder text for illustrative purposes. The in-text citations are highlighted to make them easier for you to see. I also have formatting symbols displayed because I find them useful for formatting papers. You can turn them on or off by clicking on the Show Hide Formatting Marks button, which is the button with a paragraph symbol on it at the top. Now, when you are writing papers, you will often use information from other works, such as research articles, books, chapters, websites, reports, and so on. This is perfectly fine and expected. Science works by building off of what other people have already done. However, when you use information from other sources, you need to separate which pieces of information are your own unique and original ideas from information that comes from other people. We accomplish this by using in-text citations and quotations. Plagiarism, on the other hand, is using information from other sources without giving those sources credit. If you use another person's words, ideas, methods, arguments, content, etc., without informing your readers that the information is coming from another source, then you are passing it off as your own original work. As a student, plagiarism often results in a failing grade for that assignment or even the course if it's severe enough. For professionals, plagiarism can result in retraction of your work from journals, a loss of funding, or other institutional disciplinary measures. Even if you do not intend to plagiarize, you can still be punished for it if you do not cite your sources correctly. So using in-text citations consistently and accurately is crucial for writing a strong paper. Now, before we dive into creating in-text citations, note that APA style uses an author date citation system. This allows people to identify a work based on the authors and the date the work was published. These two elements, authors and dates, are what we will use to create in-text citations to give credit to other sources. You do not need to list the article title, journal title, any credentials or affiliations the authors have, just the author's last names and dates. How you create an in-text citation depends on two things. One, the number of authors that a work has, and two, whether you are making the citation as an aside from the sentence, called a parenthetical citation, or as part of the sentence itself, called a narrative citation. Parenthetical citations are more common and typically go at the end of a sentence, though you can put them within a sentence as well if it makes more sense. To create a parenthetical citation, you enclose the author and year of publication separated by a comma in parentheses and place it at the end of a sentence. The period or other punctuation mark that ends the sentence should go after the closing parenthesis. So as you can see in this example with one author, at the end of the paraphrased information, you have a starting parenthesis, the author's last name. Again, you do not need first names or middle initials, just the last name, comma, year of publication, closing parenthesis, period. Now, if you have two authors, the process is basically the same as before, except you also add the second author's last name with an ampersand symbol before it. So again, look at the example here. And when a work has two authors like this, you will always cite both authors. Now, if a source has three or more authors, again, the process is pretty similar, except you will write et al. Period after the first author's last name, then followed by the comma and the year of publication. Please note that et al. Is followed by a period, and the comma should come after the period. So it does not matter if you have 3 authors or 23 authors, you will always use the first author's last name followed by et al. And by the way, et al. Means and others. Now, what I just showed you here are the three major examples of how to use parenthetical citations. You can also cite sources as part of a sentence, which makes sense if you're directly referring to a particular source. And this is when you would use a narrative citation. The process here is very similar, except that only the year goes in parentheses. So as you can see here, you could write something like according to Deal parentheses 2014 to start a sentence. For two authors, again, the process is the same, except that you do not use the ampersand symbol. Instead, you write out the word and. And for three authors, you still use at all, followed by a period. Now, there are a few exceptions and special considerations that you should be aware of. The first is if the author is an organization. In these situations, you simply write out the name of the organization, followed by a comma, and then the year of publication. So treat it the same as a one-author citation. If the organization can be abbreviated, make sure to write the abbreviation in brackets in the first citation, and the brackets should go after the full name of the organization, but before the comma. Then if you cite that organization again, you can just use the abbreviation instead of the full organization name. Another consideration is if you are citing more than one study at a time. So let's say that you want to cite 3 studies that support a statement you've written. The author date format is the same as before, but for parenthetical citations, you enclose multiple studies in the same set of parentheses. So here, each citation will be separated by a semicolon, and you should order the citations based on how you would in a reference list, which is alphabetically by the first author's last name. If you wanted to do this narratively, the author date format is the same as narrative in-text citations, but here you essentially treat each reference as its own item in a list, meaning that you'll separate them out with commas and then write out "and" before the final citation. The last couple of points here have to do with different sources having the same in-text citation, which would obviously be confusing. So let's say you have 2 studies with 3 or more authors published in the same year. If you were to shorten them to et al., as I'm going to briefly do here, as you'll see, the in-text citations are exactly the same, which is obviously a problem. So to avoid this, you should list out as many authors as you need to differentiate the 2 sources. So for these citations, we're just going to the second author to differentiate them. But if you need to go to the 3rd author or the 4th author and so on, that's okay. Another potential issue is if you have 2 different works with the same exact authors and years. In this case, there is no way to differentiate them because they will always be the same. So in these situations, you should add lowercase letters directly after the year. Just make sure to keep track of which reference has the A and which one has the B. Otherwise, you'll end up creating more confusion. So that is how you do in-text citations. I think the process is pretty straightforward, especially when you remember that it always comes down to 2 elements, authors and dates. The next section here will discuss how to paraphrase information you are citing, along with how to quote text if necessary. When discussing other works, you are usually going to paraphrase relevant information, meaning that you are going to put the information in your own words. So rather than describing another finding or idea using the author's original words, you will phrase it a different way. This is the preferred method of citing other works because it allows you to highlight key pieces of information, connect it with other sources, and make a coherent argument. So whenever possible, you should paraphrase what you are citing. Both parenthetical and narrative in-text citations should be placed near the paraphrased information. To think about this another way, as you are reading and writing a paper, it should be very clear which ideas and words are your own and which ideas and words are from another source. Now, if you have a long paraphrase, one that goes on for several sentences, you should cite the source in the first sentence to make it clear to your reader that this information comes from somewhere else. As you continue your paraphrase, you do not need to provide another in-text citation, provided that it is clear from your writing that you are referring to the same source, which means that you do not need to use in-text citations at the end of every single sentence if you are continuing to write about the same source. Doing so is repetitive, excessive, distracting, and unnecessary. Now, the other way of citing information is with direct quotations. There are only a handful of situations in which you should use quotes, such as if you are using a definition or writing a response to what someone wrote. Otherwise, you should paraphrase the information into your own words. The types of situations that necessitate quotes are rare. Most published research studies do not use any quotes at all. Additionally, if quotations are a significant chunk of your paper, that means you are not putting information into your own words, which actually takes you close to plagiarism. Now, if you do need to use quotes, the process is not very complex. For short quotations that are fewer than 40 words, enclose the quoted text with quotation marks, add a parenthetical citation after the closing quotation mark, and include the page number after the date of publication. So you are taking a standard in-text citation, putting a comma after the year, writing P period, and then the page number the quote came from. You should also try to incorporate the quote into the structure and flow of your sentence. Now, for longer quotes of 40 words or more, you will need to use a block quotation. Here, the quoted text will start on its own line with all of the text in the quote indented a ½ inch. Then add a parenthetical citation after the end of the quote. Now, in this situation, for block quotes only, the parenthetical citation will come after the closing period of the final sentence because the citation itself is not part of the quoted text. You do not need to enclose the block quote in quotation marks, but you should keep it double-spaced. And you can also see in this example what happens if a quote spans multiple pages. Use PP period and put a hyphen between the page numbers that the quote starts and ends on. So those are the two ways to quote information. If you want to avoid manually counting how long a quote is, you can just highlight the relevant text and then use the word count feature at the bottom of the page to see how long that particular highlighted set of information is. Again, though, you should avoid quotations as much as possible. You want to primarily paraphrase and put information into your own words. Now, in closing, in this video, we went through what plagiarism is and how to avoid it, how to cite sources using both parenthetical and narrative in-text citations following APA's author date citation system, how to cite organizations, multiple sources at once, and avoid duplicate citations, and how to cite information with paraphrases, and how to quote shorter and longer passages. I hope you found this video helpful. I used the 7th edition of the publication manual of the American Psychological Association from 2020 to make this video. I definitely recommend either buying a copy yourself or encouraging your library to pick up a couple of copies so that you can look at it as needed. There are numerous permutations and special scenarios that I cannot go into in one video, but the publication manual will cover them all with a lot of examples. So if you have a question, you're probably going to find an answer in it. The APA-style blog and Purdue OWL are two great online resources to check out as well, and I'll link to them in the video description. I also have other videos on APA style, so please check the video description for links to them. Thanks for watching, and good luck writing.